It's Tuesday, 25th November, 2025.
Today, Israeli strikes on Lebanon. How many ceasefire breaches means war?
But first, here are MEE's top stories of the day.
Donald Trump has moved to sanction some Muslim Brotherhood chapters as foreign terrorist organizations, or FTOs. The US president said this, quote, will be done in the strongest and most powerful terms after signing an executive order on Monday, adding final documents are being drawn. In order to be designated an FTO, a group must not only engage in terror activities, but pose a direct threat to US national security. MEE asked Professor Nathan Brown from George Washington University whether the Muslim Brotherhood poses any such threat. He told us none at all. Read his full analysis on our website.
Turkish security forces have detained 3 people suspected of working for the United Arab Emirates Intelligence Service, the Istanbul Chief Prosecutor's Office announced on Tuesday. The office said the suspects had allegedly been collecting personal information on people working in important public offices in Turkey by using a Turkish phone number. Turkey and the UAE repaired their ties in 2021 following extensive talks to resolve their regional and bilateral differences, which was sparked by the Arab Spring. However, in recent months, the Sudan war has rekindled some of the tensions between the regional powerhouses.
MEE has uncovered controversial comments from British Times columnist Melanie Phillips, who said there is, quote, no such thing as the Palestinian people at a conference ironically titled Rage Against the Hate. During a 20-minute speech at New York City's Museum of Jewish Heritage last night, the broadcaster likened Islam to a death cult.
The West has bought into the agenda for its own destruction at the hands of Islam. This is a death wish by the West. And if you have a death wish, you cannot fight a death cult, which is what the West is facing in the forces of Islam.
As well as insulting Islam, Phillips stated, quote, one could say Christianity was a Jewish sect that got slightly out of hand. She drew criticism in 2019 by describing claims of Islamophobia as inherently anti-Semitic in a Jewish Chronicle article titled Don't Fall for Bogus Claims of Islamophobia. Get the full stories at middleeasteye.net.
And now to our main story. Israel's intensifying attacks on Lebanon culminated with unannounced strikes on the capital on Sunday, in what Hezbollah's deputy political leader said crossed a new red line.
هذا العدوان اليوم على الضاحية الجنوبية يخرق خط أحمر جديد.
5 people were killed and 28 wounded in strikes Israel said targeted a senior Hezbollah commander. They hit Beirut's densely populated southern suburb of Dahiyeh. Haytam Ali Tabatabai, Israel's stated target, was killed.
It's just one of over 10,000 breaches. Sorry, what did you guys say? Rush? I got confused. Okay, should I just start from me? Okay, I'll just start when I'm ready. It's just one of over 10,000 breaches by Israel of the year-long ceasefire with Hezbollah, documented by UN military forces in Lebanon. Lebanon's health ministry says at least 331 people have been killed and around 1,000 people wounded in these attacks. The UN has confirmed at least 127 civilian deaths, noting that the real count is likely to be much higher.
But Sunday's strike, the first on Beirut in 7 months, marks a geographic escalation beyond Israel's previous focus on the southern border and Palestinian camps. As the first such attack without any evacuation warning, it also marks an escalation in the nature of aggression.
Hezbollah has not launched any retaliatory attacks since the ceasefire, but Israel asserts the group is trying to rebuild its military capabilities in contravention of the ceasefire agreement and claims Ali Tabatabai was leading these efforts.
Does this escalation mark a total breakdown in international commitments? And what does it mean for people in Lebanon just trying to live their lives? On the line now, we've got regional journalist and resident of Beirut, Giovanna Vial. Giovanna, it's great to have you. 10,000 ceasefire breaches sounds like quite an extortionate number. What are we talking about here? What do these ceasefire breaches look like?
Hi, Matilda. Thank you so much for having me. Well, as you mentioned, I live in Beirut, and these 10,000 ceasefire breaches means almost daily attacks coming from Israel, right? And these attacks, they are more concentrated usually in the southern parts of the country, where not only Hezbollah, but mostly of the Shia population is concentrated. But in the last Sunday, we had once again, and I say once again because during the war, before the ceasefire, this was the norm, this was the rule, right? Attacking Beirut. But last Sunday, we had an escalation in which Israel stops attacking only the southern region of Lebanon and starts once again attacking and using their Dahiyeh doctrine to attack the suburbs of Beirut, a densely populated area full of civilians. And in our daily lives, we hear Israeli drones, we hear surveillance drones all the time. So we have to live with the imminence of an Israeli attack and with the possibility of these attacks all the time, either if you are in a Shia neighborhood or in a Christian neighborhood. But for the Shias, as they commonly say in Beirut, they don't have even post-trauma stress because the trauma never ceased to exist, right? They're under constant an imminent possibility of Israeli attacks.
And what is that like, the psychological impact of these attacks? I mean, Israel says that it is targeting military hubs, Hezbollah hubs, but a lot of these areas are very densely populated. What is the impact on day-to-day life for Lebanese civilians?
Matilda, when we talk about Lebanese civilians, we need to make a very important differentiation for people who are listening to us. There is not just one Lebanese civilian. Lebanon is a sectarian country. We have 18 different sects, and among them, the most important ones, let's put it this way, the Christians, the Muslim Sunnis, and the Muslim Shias. So depending on which kind of civilian you are, the impact of this psychological war is very different. Israel mostly attack Lebanese civilian Shia areas because Hezbollah is a Shia group, right? Is a Shia religious and political group. So the impact is very different. Me, myself, I live in a Christian neighborhood, and although we listen to the drones on a daily basis, we are not attacked for being in a Christian neighborhood. So the Christians, they have been historically associated with the colonization of French, and therefore they are more protected from the Israeli attacks, whereas the Shias, for instance, they are entangled politically speaking, ideologically speaking, with Iran and the axis of resistance, and therefore they are the primary targets of Israel in this aggression. So if you are living in a Shia neighborhood, the psychological warfare affects your daily life in every single aspect of it. So you are constantly in fear of an imminent attack.
Thank you for taking us through that. Now, one of those Shia neighborhoods is Dahiyeh. You mentioned the Dahiyeh doctrine. This was a military tactic that Israeli armed forces used during their 2006 war on Lebanon, and it involved deliberate, large-scale attacks on civilian infrastructure with the distinct intention to turn the local population against Hezbollah. Are we seeing a return of that? And have these attacks impacted Hezbollah's popularity inside Lebanon?
Okay, so it's very important to mention that Hezbollah is born as this resistance against the Israeli occupation of Lebanon in 1880 and then in Beirut in 1882, right? And Hezbollah is a very popular and very mingled with the civilian society movement. It's very different to differentiate a combatant of Hezbollah and a person who lives in Hezbollah neighborhood, for instance. So I would say since the last year, since the last war in September, October, November 2024, it's not that the popularity of Hezbollah has decreased among the Shia population in which they find their biggest support. But in fact, it is that one of Israel's strategies is diminishing Hezbollah's popularity in social media, popularity towards other countries in the world, and portraying them as this military defeated group And it's actually after the death of Nasrallah, the chief of Hezbollah, and the most important figure when it comes to detaining this Israeli aggression and this Israeli expansion of the occupation in southern Lebanon. When he dies in September 2024, Hezbollah lost a lot of its military power and its morale. So it's not that they lost their popularity, but rather that they are feeling the constant geopolitical dynamics and the constant aggression of Israelis in the region as a part of this expansion Zionist plan.
Now, Giovanna, you are also an academic expert in humanitarian law. Just talk us quickly through where Israel's latest attacks on Lebanon stand in relation to the law.
So, Matilda, when we talk about international humanitarian law, first of all, Israel is breaching a ceasefire, right, that they agreed with since November 27th of November 2024. So we have, first of all, a ceasefire being breached, which is a violation of international law and international humanitarian law. Let's remind ourselves that Hezbollah has not perpetrated any attacks whatsoever, neither in Israelis' territories or against Israelis since the establishment of the ceasefire. So we have first this breach of ceasefire, and we have second, and most importantly, what can be considered war crimes, because they don't mind two very important principles of international humanitarian law, which are the principles of proportionality and distinguishment. So every time you attack an area that is densely populated by civilians, you have to make sure that you are attacking combatants and not civilians, not people who are of combat, who are out of combat. And Israel simply denies this principle, simply doesn't observe this principle. And even if you attack a densely populated area, you have to make this math of proportionality. If your military target or what you're saying is a military target is worth killing dozens of civilians. And this math is usually never done by the Israeli army, which the consequence is committing war crimes over and over, not only in the Palestinian territories, but in territories in Syria, in Egypt, and now also in Lebanon.
Giovanna Vial, thank you so much for joining us on MEE Live for the first time, hopefully not the last. Now, Lebanese President Joseph Aoun has called on the international community to intervene firmly to stop Israel's attacks, while global leaders have largely remained quiet. But today, the UN called for an impartial probe into Israel's strikes on Lebanon, following last week's attack on a Palestinian refugee camp that caused only civilian casualties, including 11 children.
In one of the latest and deadliest attacks, at least 13 civilians, including 11 children, were killed and at least 6 civilians injured last week in an Israeli strike on the Ain al-Hilwa camp for Palestinian refugees near Sidon. All the fatalities we have documented as a result of this strike were civilians, raising serious concerns that the Israeli military's attack may have violated international humanitarian law principles on the conduct of hostilities. There must be prompt and impartial investigations into the Ain al-Hilwa strike, as well as all other incidents involving possible violations of international humanitarian law by all parties, both before and after the ceasefire. Those responsible must be held to account.
Israel says its attacks are necessary to neutralize Hezbollah, and Sunday's target, Haytam Ali Tabatabai, is the group's most senior member to be killed by Israel since the start of the ceasefire. Here's Israeli spokesperson Shosh Bedrosian.
And a short while ago, the IDF attacked the Hezbollah chief of staff in the heart of Beirut, who led the strengthening and arming of the terrorist organization. Prime Minister Netanyahu ordered the attack upon the recommendation of the defense minister and the IDF chief of staff. Israel is determined to act and achieve its goals anywhere and at all times.
If Israel is, quote, determined to achieve its goals anywhere, what are its goals? Exactly what lengths is Israel prepared to go to? And how much of the region could it implicate?
Here to discuss the geopolitics of it all is US-Lebanese analyst Professor Fawaz Gerges. Fawaz, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Fawaz, you've just arrived in London, straight from Beirut. What's the atmosphere there like? Not just in the aftermath of this bombing, but in the aftermath of a year of war. And what's the current status of Lebanon as a state right now?
Well, I mean, you have a war of attrition. The Prime Minister Nawaf Salam said today, you have a war of attrition, but by one side. Israel has been waging a war of attrition since the ceasefire was signed in November 2024. According to the United Nations International Forces, UNIFIL forces, Israel has violated the ceasefire 7,500 times by air and 2,500 by land incursions into Lebanon. So the question really, I know all of us are talking about ceasefire. The question is, what kind of ceasefire? Where Israel has been waging what I call a low-intensity war, as opposed to all-out war. It has killed and injured more than 1,000 Lebanese, destroying houses, homes, businesses, terrorizing the civilian populations. You have now more than 300,000 Lebanese in the south that have not really been able to return to their homes. And why? Because Israel has bulldozed hundreds of villages in order to create a buffer zone or a security force zone in southern Lebanon, not to mention the 5 hills that it still occupies. So given the lack of security in Lebanon, given the fact that Israel violates Lebanese sovereignty on a daily basis and bombs Lebanon in the south, in the Bekaa Valley, you could imagine how the population feels. There is no economy. There is no investment. There's a veto, implicit veto, on international investment in Lebanon because they are the United States and other powers are exerting a lot of pressure on the Lebanese government to go after Hezbollah and disarm Hezbollah. So the population has been suffering from one of the greatest economic crises in the past 6 years, and then a war by Israel a year ago, which basically killed thousands of Lebanese and cost almost $10 billion, and there has been no reconstruction. So I don't need to tell your audience how the people in Lebanon feel as the war continues, as Israel continues to bomb Lebanon on a daily basis, and there's no economy to talk about in the country now.
You mentioned the Lebanese government and how they've been tasked with kind of having to degrade Hezbollah at the same time while Israel is targeting Hezbollah targets. Why is the state not doing something, have a stronger response against Israel? Why have they taken this deal, and why are they sort of passively just sitting along as Israel, as you mentioned, devastates the south of Lebanon?
Well, I mean, for a variety of reasons. First of all, we don't really have a strong army. We don't have an army that really has weapons that could really use in order to protect Lebanese sovereignty. We have really more of a police force as opposed to an army, because the United States and other European powers basically do not really provide the Lebanese army with basically very important arms to defend its sovereignty. Plus, you have a Lebanese government that has been installed since the Israeli war in Lebanon, that believes the only way out of this particular dilemma is to appeal to the international community and the Arab community to exert pressure on Israel in order to end its war against Lebanon. And this in return for disarming Hezbollah. So the Lebanese government has prioritized disarming Hezbollah, having a monopoly on the use of force in Lebanon. And all the appeals by the president and the prime minister to the international community has not really produced anything, because Benjamin Netanyahu does not really care about what the international community says. Benjamin Netanyahu, as long as he has the support of the United States, he'll do whatever he wants. And you're asking me about Lebanon, the Israel low-intensity war in Lebanon. It's the same war that's taking place in Gaza, even though there was a ceasefire in Gaza. The same war taking place in the West Bank, the occupied West Bank. Israel violates Syrian sovereignty on a daily basis. So what we are really witnessing is a new Israeli strategy. And this strategy, basically from deterrence to offensive realism. Israel now attacks all of its neighbors, not because they have the capabilities to attack Israel, but because Israel thinks they could have the potential in the future to basically inflict harm on Israel. So Israel's strategy could really be simply summarized as domination. It's trying to dominate, whether you're talking about Gaza or the West Bank or Lebanon and Syria, and force its neighbors to normalize relations with Israel and basically accept its dictate, as Israel fits. So the Lebanese government does not really have many options. It's really pressed between a rock and a harder place. The rock of intensifying American and Western pressures and Arab pressures in order to disarm Hezbollah, and the hard place that disarming Hezbollah by force could trigger civil strife. And that's why the Lebanese government now is really trying to find a wiggle room, trying to find a way out of this particular strategic dilemma in which it finds itself.
How degraded is Hezbollah now? I mean, given all of these airstrikes for a year, their leadership has been killed during the war and ever since then as well, as we've just seen. What's the state of Hezbollah right now? And is Israel using that? Are Hezbollah actually still a threat in any real way? Is Israel still kind of using that just as a way to destabilize the country and continue bombing the south and lashing out against all its neighbors, as you mentioned?
Well, let me try to answer your question first by saying that Israel has violated the ceasefire from day one. Israel now says the reason why we are escalating the war against Hezbollah, because Hezbollah is trying to rebuild its forces, trying to restructure its forces, trying to basically rejuvenate itself. But the simple answer that Israel has never stopped its war against Lebanon, even after it signed the ceasefire. Israel is obliged to respect the ceasefire. The second point I want to say that Hezbollah has suffered major shattering blows in its war against Israel, particularly the killing of its historic political and military leaderships, including Hassan Nasrallah, the iconic leader of Lebanon. A few thousand of its battle-hardened fighters have been killed and injured. And more importantly now, Hezbollah finds itself under siege. In fact, the Syrian regime now is as hostile to Hezbollah as Israel is. Syria used to be, you might say, one of the major routes for Hezbollah to get arms and resources. Iran now, there's so much pressure on Iran, Iran can no longer really provide money and resources for Hezbollah. And the Lebanese government is trying to put a great deal of pressure on Hezbollah to disarm. And here you have Israel basically bombing Hezbollah on daily basis in order to really squeeze Hezbollah. But the reality is, despite everything that I've said, even though Hezbollah is weakened, even though Hezbollah is facing a major reckoning, Hezbollah is not dead. Hezbollah continues to basically try to really find a way out of the strategic dilemma that it faces. Why? Because Hezbollah is deeply institutionalized. Hezbollah has thousands, tens of thousands of very committed fighters. It has a very ironclad ideology, an ideology that believes in martyrdom and in basically sacrificing life for the country and the organization. And most importantly, I would argue, Hezbollah has in Arabic what we call al-hadina al-sha'biyya, the social and political base. You have 1 or 2 million people who basically support Hezbollah and willing to die for Hezbollah. So all in all, even though Hezbollah has been weakened tremendously, Hezbollah continues to be a major force to be reckoned with. And that's why the Americans and the Israelis are trying to force the Lebanese government to disarm Hezbollah, because only by disarming Hezbollah, that Hezbollah could basically, or triggering a civil strife between the Lebanese government and Hezbollah, that Hezbollah could really basically, the power of Hezbollah, the ability of Hezbollah to be a major force will be degraded a great deal.
Fawaz, you have a new book out called The Great Betrayal. I'm guessing it's a lot about what you've spoken about in this interview. Can you tell us what it's about?
Well, I mean, my book really is about the 100-year, what I call the Great Betrayal. Whether you're talking about the great betrayal of the Palestinians between 1917 and the present, and also between what I call the powerful partnership between local dictators and Western powers, particularly the United States. And this powerful partnership between the local dictators in the region and the United States explains to a large extent why the region is what it is today. The lack of democracy, political authoritarianism, the inability of young Arab and Muslim people to really basically own their history and take charge of their countries. But more importantly, I would argue that my book speaks to the aspirations, the aspirations of tens of millions of people, what I call self-determination and freedom. That is, people who really would like to have, to own, to be in charge of their countries, to take their countries, to really reclaim their countries from the dictators for life and their superpower stakeholders or great power stakeholders.
Fawaz, just the final question before we kind of let you go and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. We saw just recently MBS and Trump meet in the White House. The Saudis and the USA are key stakeholders in what happens in Lebanon. Where are they in this whole situation? Why is this just continuing? And we haven't really heard much from them. I doubt if Lebanon was even on the agenda when they met recently.
Well, look, let me contextualize your question by saying, think of the ceasefire in Gaza and think of the state that guaranteed the ceasefire, whether you're talking about Turkey or Egypt or Qatar or other states. What's happening to the ceasefire in Gaza? You're talking about 1,300 Palestinians have been killed since the ceasefire was signed, right? And in Lebanon now, you're talking about more than 1,000 Lebanese who have been killed and injured in the past 1 year. And this raises big questions about who can really basically deter Benjamin Netanyahu, who could really prevent Benjamin Netanyahu from renewing the war, whether you're talking about Gaza or Lebanon or Syria or other places. And this tells you a great deal about this relationship between the United States and Israel. As long as the United States allows Benjamin Netanyahu to do what he wants, and as long as the Arab states, whether you're talking about Egypt and Saudi Arabia and the Gulf state and Jordan and others, don't really basically exert pressure on the United States, and they have tremendous leverage. We know they could do it. I think Benjamin Netanyahu will continue to have his permanent war, his forever war. He has made it very clear that the mission has not been accomplished yet. And Benjamin Netanyahu's mission is absolute victory, total victory, domination of all his neighbors. And that's why, sadly and tragically, the Arab states and the Muslim states have not really used the leverage they have in order to pressure the United States and basically put an end to this kind of murderous strategy on the part of Benjamin Netanyahu.
Fawaz Gerges, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
For today, that's all that we have time for. But before we lose you, we want to hear from you.
Please send in your thoughts and questions to at Middle East Eye on any of our social platforms, or email us on meelive@middleeasteye.net.
We'll be here at 5 p.m. GMT, noon in New York, every Tuesday and Thursday.
Goodbye.